lack of interaction with Asians, and that prejudice toward Asian Americans correlates with prejudice toward other racial and ethnic minority groups. So those are some of the general findings. We also took a look at attitudes on all sorts of issues. We found, for example, interestingly, that a higher proportion of Chinese Americans, by a statistically significant measure, support the notion of gay marriage than of the general population. So I invite you to take a look at the website for all of these details. I now turn matters over to our wonderful panel. We really owe the three individuals who have joined us our gratitude for their taking time out of their busy days to share with us, as experts on race and ethnicity, their viewpoints. Regrettably, our friend Congressman Mike Honda, due to a last-minute matter that arose, was unable to come today. However, we are joined by three other distinguished panelists, and I'd like to introduce them so that they may present their views. I'll start in the order that they'll be speaking with Mr. Ralph Everett, President and CEO of the highly influential Joint Center for Political and Economic Studies. Most recently, he co-chaired the Obama transition team for the Commerce Department, where, of course, former Committee of 100 member Gary Locke has just been confirmed to head up that very important government agency. Then, Antonia Hernandez, President and CEO of the California Community Foundation and formerly the President of the Mexican American Legal Defense and Education Fund. She joined the Committee of 100's recent delegation of Latino leaders who toured China. Finally, Mr. Charles Cook, publisher of the very well-regarded Washington publication, The Cook Political Report, an expert also on China, a friend to Committee of 100 who has participated in our programs in the past and also visited China with us. So with that, I will now open this up for discussion among our panelists, beginning with Mr. Everett. There are index cards at your tables for questions. If you wish to pose a question to any or all of the panelists, please jot it down, and those will be brought up to me toward the close of our session. So, Mr. Everett, we turn matters over to you.
Thank you very much for that question. First of all, let me just say this before I answer his question, if I answer his question. I'm very delighted to be here with you today. It gives me an opportunity to listen and to learn and to share my experiences with you. I might add that I am the product of the segregated South. I was 13 years old when the Civil Rights Bill was passed in 1964. I was 14 when the Voting Rights Act was passed in 1965. I now head an organization called the Joint Center for Political and Economic Studies. And for those of you who don't know what that is, it's a nonprofit, nonpartisan public policy institution that does research and focuses on issues of concern to African Americans and other people of color. The Joint Center was started in 1970, and I'm telling you this because it's going to be relevant to what I say. In 1970, there were less than 1,500 African Americans who had been elected to any office in this country. The first two African American mayors of major cities were elected in 1967. So there were four individuals that got together and went to the Ford Foundation with a proposal to create an organization that would train the newly elected African American officials, because there were no mentors in the country for them to go to and ask questions as to how do you do budgets, how do you legislate. So the Ford Foundation back in 1970 gave a grant of about $800,000 to start the Joint Center, and that would be in today's dollars $6 or $7 million. And what resulted from this was all the newly elected African American officials were invited to Washington to meet and to learn, and there were seminars and whatnot that were created for them. This was an opportunity that many of them met for the first time. As a direct result of this meeting, there are currently 9 organizations that represent African American elected officials, all the way from mayors to city council folks to school board folks to elected governors, to Congressional Black Caucus. All of these organizations got their start at the Joint Center for Political and Economic Studies. And now that number of 1,500 in 1970 is now over 11,000 elected officials. We do research and policy work for the general public, and a lot of this work is used by the organizations in different areas. But one of the lessons that we learned, and I think I can share here from the civil rights movement and from that period, was it was just very important for these groups to be engaged in the process, to participate in the process, and to reach out to other groups and form coalitions. As a result, at the Joint Center, which we continue to operate today, we have created a number of institutes. One is a health policy institute where we look at health disparities and look at the reasons why there are health disparities and trying to work with other groups to improve the lives of individuals. We recently created a Media and Technology Institute. In that institute, we're going to be doing research. We are going to be looking at how minorities are treated in the media. We're going to be looking at ownership in the media and doing various research in that area. Through the Bipartisan Policy Center, we also have become involved in a climate change initiative. When you look around the table, there are a lot of African Americans have really not been at the table when you're dealing with climate change and everything that folks are talking about now. So we created a 15-member commission composed of scientists, academics, professionals, a few lawyers to sit around and discuss and actually contribute to this area. It's very important at the Joint Center that we engage in bridge building. And the Joint Center wanted to create a dialogue and a conversation with all groups, because what we do at the Joint Center works for the betterment of the entire country and everybody in the country. And the Census Bureau has said that there will be no majority race in this country in about 30 years. And the world is changing very quickly, as many of you know just by being here. My mother died less than 3 years ago, and if I were able to talk to her and tell her that there was an African American who was president of the United States of America, she would not believe me. That is how fast the world is changing. And one thing that President Obama did during the period of his candidacy is, by his presence in the race, in the presidential race, it provided for a more open discussion of the types of issues that were in the survey that Frank spoke about. Race is one of those things that people didn't like to talk about much. But by having an African American in the race, having a woman in the race, and having other folks in the race, it allowed for a more open dialogue. So I think that we often talk about tensions and conflicts between different ethnic groups and between the races, but one thing that President Obama's administration has done is for a more open discussion of these issues, because I think that there are less tensions and less conflicts when people understand each other and realize that they have the same common goals and aspirations for their children, for their family, and for their well-being. So I look forward today to having a discussion about some of the findings that are in the report. One thing I can say from the report, though, looking at the report from 2001 and the one that we have today, you can see that things are headed in the right direction in terms of being a better understanding. And I frankly think that comes from people getting to know me as an African American better and other races better. Because a lot of times we don't share as much as we should. We don't invite each other into our homes. We don't invite each other into our churches and our places of worship. And by doing that, though, you create a better understanding of the people around and about you. So I will stop with that and pass it on to Antonia.
Well, it is a pleasure to be here. And first I want to thank the Committee of 100. I was one of the few privileged to go to China last year. In fact, we left the night of the election. And I want to thank Roger and Vivian Wang, and Vivian, who was our host throughout the trip, and it was an exceptional experience. I am an immigrant myself, and as a small child, I came to the United States and settled in Los Angeles. And what the survey has done, sort of said to me is what I've always known, that there's a lot of similarities between the Asian community